Now I invite our chief guest, Honorable Dr. G. Mohan Gopal sir, former Director, National Judiciary Academy. I request Mohan Gopal sir to make on video so that we can see him on projector screen. Thank you, sir. First of all, I would like to share sir's big introduction in brief. Professor Dr. G. Mohan Gopal sir is a former director of National Judiciary Academy of Supreme Court of India since 2006 to 2011. He is the founder chair of the National Court Management System Committee of Supreme Court of India. He is also the former vice chancellor of National Law School, Bengaluru. He also worked as director of Rajiv Gandhi Institute of Contemporary Studies. He argued against the EWS quota in the Supreme Court. While arguing, he said that the EWS quota will destroy the social fabric of equality and undermine the concept of reservation as a tool of representation. He is well known as the expert so far as the interpretation of the Constitution is concerned. Now I request Honorable Dr. G. Mohan Gopal sir.
Thank you very much, Madam, and thank you very much to Mr. Jarunde for the privilege of the invitation to join you. I'm sorry, due to some logistical reasons, I was unable to join you physically, but I was very keen to be with you virtually. I'm speaking from Trivandrum in Kerala. And if I was in Delhi, it would have been a little closer. I divide my time between Delhi and Trivandrum. And so I'm very happy to be with you, and thank you very much for making it possible to be with you online. Let me also acknowledge and thank Senior Advocate Dr. K.S. Chauhan for his excellent presentation today, and also for his really excellent presentations to the Supreme Court and powerful presentations to the Supreme Court during the arguments for the EWS case and indeed for many other cases. I think he is a very important and very effective voice for all the backward classes of India in the Supreme Court. So I acknowledge that and thank him for his presentation, which I had the privilege to hear. Will there be time, Mr. Jarunde, for any interaction or questions after that, or should I?
Yes, sir, there will be interaction of questions. 3-4 questions will be there.
Okay. Thank you very much. So I'll try to share my thoughts within the time limit prescribed to me. What I would like to do is to very briefly describe the nature of the matter that was before the Supreme Court and its decision. And first part briefly, and second part go into understanding the context of that decision and the significance of that decision for the future. This is along the lines of the very nice introduction made by Mr. Jarunde, who raised these kind of questions. What happened in the case, and what is its significance, and what does it mean for our struggle for social justice? So that will be the second part. The first part will be very briefly on the case itself. On the case itself, as you know, with extraordinary speed, a government system that barely moves when common people face great distress, moved with lightning speed to enact this 103rd Amendment. It was, as we all know, approved within 1 week of its introduction into the Lok Sabha. It was signed and made into law. And thereafter, it became effective in a matter of days in many states. And it is rapidly implemented all across the country. So it gives us a sense, that itself gives us a sense of two things. One is who's running this country and who does this benefit. Because it got implemented so quickly because its benefit is going to those who are ruling the country, those who are implementing it so fast, and those are the dominant oligarchy, the dominant caste oligarchy that rules this country. So they pushed it through, they got it adopted, and they implemented with great speed across the country, including in a left-ruled state such as my state, where I'm speaking from, where they were no less enthusiastic to implement it, because the left is also dominated by the same caste oligarchy. In fact, while interacting with them, I asked them why the EWS is implemented exactly the same way in Gujarat and in Kerala. What is the ideological difference between you and the RSS BJP? And I've not got a satisfactory answer to that. So this was rushed through, and then many cases were filed challenging it, including a case by the All India Backward Classes Federation, represented by retired Acting Chief Justice Ishwaraya. And it is the case in which I had the opportunity to argue, and many other cases, many other cases. Chronologically, Jan Hit Abhiyan was apparently the first writ petition to be filed, so the title goes by Jan Hit Abhiyan, but there were many petitioners. The petitions were not taken up for a long time, and to the credit of Justice Lalit, in his very short tenure, he gave this a lot of priority, and we must give him credit for that. He gave it a lot of priority. He listed it. He set aside 6.5 days for the argument. And although I realize, for good reason, Justice Chauhan does not see much significance in the dissent, I see great significance in the dissent, because of what was before the court. What was before the court was not Indira Sawhney, was not the question of 8 lakhs or 10% or anything like that. A simple issue before the court was the Parliament had amended the Constitution. The greatest power of Parliament is its constituent power. Baba Saheb Ambedkar had taken a strong view in the Constituent Assembly that Parliament can make any change to the Constitution. Rightly so, because he was a deeply committed Democrat. But in 1973, to prevent the Constitution from making progressive changes to the Constitution, a conservative 13-judge bench of the Supreme Court, as you know, delivered a judgment called Keshwanand Bharati versus State of Kerala, in which the Supreme Court said, yes, you have earlier in another decision, Golaknath, the court had said that Parliament cannot amend the fundamental rights of the Constitution, putting severe limits on, or strong limit on, the power of Parliament to amend the Constitution. Keshwanand Bharati loosened that a little bit and said that yes, you can amend any part of the Constitution, including fundamental rights, but you cannot amend the basic structure of the Constitution, which they did not define. They suggested some features. They say basic structure means basic features of the Constitution. That judgment itself listed certain basic features. Other judgments have added to those basic features. So the issue for the court is, what is the limit of the amending power of Parliament when it exercises its constituent power to amend the Constitution? And initially there was a view that Parliament, first there was a view that Parliament can make any amendments, which was a view that Baba Saheb had taken in the Constituent Assembly. Then there was a view that no, you cannot, strong limitation, that you cannot amend fundamental rights. I'm sort of simplifying it. And then the current view emerged that you can amend the Constitution, but you cannot touch its basic structure. So when, as part of the office memorandum or related to the office memorandum implementing Mandal Commission, the government brought in a memorandum implementing economic reservations as an executive measure, not even as a legislative measure, ordinary law, not even as an ordinary law, but as a part of the implementation of Mandal Commission recommendation. Not as a constitutional amendment, but as ordinary law. When they proposed economic reservations, Indira Sawhney struck it down and said, no, you cannot have economic reservations, because under the Constitution, as it stood at that point of time, you cannot have reservations on the basis of economic criteria alone. This was Narasimha Rao's government. So what the court basically said to them is, if you want economic reservations, you have to amend the constitution. You cannot bring it within the existing constitutional provisions. They waited for an opportunity, and when they got this big majority, the BJP, the dominant caste oligarchy got this big majority, they quickly brought forward a constitutional amendment, and they amended the constitution and inserted two totally brand new provisions, Article 15.6 and Article 16.6, which did not exist during the, before, obviously did not exist before that, and did not exist during Indira Sawhney and the earlier jurisprudence on reservation and on economic reservation. And Indira Sawhney did not say that either 50% is against the basic structure. They did not say economic reservations is against the basic structure. They did not decide on any of this being part of the basic structure. In fact, many courts, many judgments before and after Indira Sawhney have said that reservation is not even a fundamental right, let alone being a part of the basic structure. And therefore, the question of 50% reservation being part of the basic structure or economic reservation being prohibited by the basic structure is far away from us, because even reservation is not considered to be a fundamental right by our current jurisprudence. So when they brought in this, which is why, for example, EWS is not being implemented in Tamil Nadu, and it has been suspended in Assam because there is no fundamental right associated with it. So when this new constitutional provision came, the only question before this court in the EWS case was, does this new amendment, these two new provisions, do they offend the basic structure of the Constitution as that has been defined by the Supreme Court? And I think the very significant victory is, the rest is detailed on what they said on this or the other. But the most important thing is 2 of the 5 judges, including the sitting Chief Justice of India, for whatever reasons, they held that EWS 15.6 and 66 violates the basic structure of the Constitution. And they said it violates the basic structure of equality. They did not say it is because of 50%. In fact, none of the judges said that 50% is part of the basic structure. So the 50% issue never came up in Jan Hit Abhiyan. The 2 judges said that for whatever reasoning they gave, they said that the basic structure of the Constitution, the basic fabric of the idea of equality in the Constitution is violated by this provision of EWS in 15.6, 16.6. So today when we say that 15.6, 16.6 violates the basic structure of the Constitution and is unconstitutional, it is no longer our view, it is the view of the Chief Justice of India and of another very senior and a very senior judge, who, by the way, that's not incidental to the weightage of his opinion, that's not related to that, but we note that he's a person who is very well versed with constitutional jurisprudence on reservations. He wrote the main judgment, and the Chief Justice said in open court, I concur with Justice Ravindra Bhatt's judgment, and he added the words, in its entirety. So we have the full force of 2 judges saying that EWS is unconstitutional. 3 judges have said it is constitutional, but it was a split decision. So today I'm able to go to different parts of the country and say that this, by the measure that was before the court, is EWS against the basic structure principle of equality. 2 of the 5 judges, including the sitting Chief Justice of India, said it violates and destroys the basic structure principle of equality under the Constitution. So that's the first part about the significance of the judgment that we must bear in mind. Now we go to the question of what we do with the judgment. I'll come to it at the end. I also, on behalf of the client that I represent, a review petition has been filed. DMK has filed a review petition. Number of review petitions have been filed, and we will see how the court deals with it and how we will move forward. Much lies in the hands of the current Chief Justice of India, who will definitely have to decide who will replace the former Chief Justice of India, whether it will be himself or someone else, and that will be entirely up to him. And then going forward in May, one more judge of this bench will will retire, and in October a third judge of the bench will retire, leaving only two judges from the original bench after October. So we don't know how this is going to play out, and we will only be speculating. Now let me focus on why we think it is violative of the basic structure, is unconstitutional, and how it implicates a struggle for social justice. More than the technical argument about basic structure, on which we elaborated, I particularly elaborated in great length at great length in the Supreme Court, which may not be of much interest to this audience. I think what is more significant is for us to understand what is the significance of this EWS, which has been upheld by the court. So let's forget the judgment. It has been upheld by the court, and what is its significance for the social justice movement in our country? For this, I would like to share with you a small screen to create to sort of illustrate my point, and I will just share the screen with you. So here it says social and educational status. Okay. Here it says backward class. The Constitution mentions two words, backward class in Article 16 and socially and educationally backward classes in Article 15 of the Constitution. So we have one category called backward class based on social and educational and other backwardness status. In Article 16, the word backward class includes SC and ST as well. Then we have others. The Constitution does not use the word forward class, but we assume that others are forward class. So we've got a backward class and a forward class. Now, within the backward class, the backward class includes, as we all know, Avarna community backward classes. Avarna community backward classes, right? Non-Dvija community backward classes, as well as that we know. And very often this reservation is misunderstood as caste reservation because people assume that this backward class is only castes, only the lower caste, SC, ST, and backward castes of the lower castes of the Avarna castes of the Hindu community. This is the wrong belief, but the common belief. The fact is the backward class also includes many Savarna communities. Brahmin, Vaishya, Kshatriya, Shudra. There is Manipuri Brahmin, there is Goswami, there are many communities which for the last several years have been in the backward classes. So we distinguish between Savarna caste or Savarna caste and backward class. Backward class includes Savarna and Avarna, both. Now, one good example of a Savarna community, OBC, is Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Mod Ganchi community, which is a Savarna community, which is said to be a member of the Vaishya Varna, but was included in the OBC. And so that is one example. And that's why Prime Minister says he's backward class, although he's Savarna, he's upper caste, but he's backward class. There are others also. Now, how does a community become a backward class? A community becomes a backward class when it satisfies about 15 to 20 criteria specified by the National or State Backward Classes Commission, which are all secular criteria. You can be Hindu, Muslim, upper caste, lower caste. Supreme Court ordered that, in fact, that transgender should be backward class. National Commission for Backward Class has decided that orphans, people without their parents, they should be backward class. So we have backward class is a secular open criteria of communities that SC/ST also, of communities that suffer from marginalization and lack of representation. Marginalization and lack of representation, and as a consequence, so 4 types of criteria are used: social, economic, educational, and political representation, who are below certain criteria, minimum criteria socially, educationally, economically, and in terms of political representation. They are backward classes. They can be from any caste, any religion. We have Hindus, Muslims, transgender, upper caste, lower caste. Everybody is in this backward class. It's one of the most important category, including SC/ST, one of the most important categories of this country to unite people who are victims of deprivation, marginalization, lack of representation across region, religion, caste, class, across all these divides to create solidarity, social solidarity. This backward class OBC SC/ST criterion is a very powerful criterion. It's a very powerful criterion. Now, the Savarnas can be in the backward class. Avarnas can be in the backward class. Now, the others, and they have backward class as reservation. On the other side, the other communities have no reservation. Who are they? We can refer to them by exclusion as saying they are socially and educationally forward classes. Because if they were socially and educationally backward class, by these criteria, they would have been included here. And if they were upper caste, they would have been included and given reservation as OBC. So here there is socially and educationally forward class community, Savarna community. They are forward class. They are forward class above. Well, right now, after EWS, they are above a cutoff. But otherwise, the Savarna community who are not backward classes are don't have reservation. Okay, so Savarna community forward class did not have reservation. Anyone. Avarna community backward class, creamy layer did not have reservation. Not SC/ST, only OBC backward class. So two communities did not have reservation. One was Savarna community forward, which is a forward class. Savarna community backward class have reservation. They have reservation. But Savarna community forward class, the strongest communities among Savarnas, they did not have reservation. But Avarnas who come from weaker sections, backward classes, but were in the creamy layer, but their communities are weak, they did not have reservations. After the creamy layer was, OBCs, after creamy layer was included. So these were the two sets that did not have reservations. What EWS did was, they took the Savarna community and gave the forward classes of Savarna community reservation. They brought them to this side with a creamy layer cutoff. With a creamy layer cutoff. So they now have Savarna community OBC, backward class, and they have Savarna community forward class getting reservation. Whereas the Avarna community backward class is left without any reservation. So I can give you an actually recent example that there is a young student from a postgraduate, many examples like this, postgraduate student for medicine, postgraduate medicine in Tamil Nadu, who applied for in the open category because she belongs to a creamy layer. But she comes from a community, Nadar community, which has very few, which is a backward community, has very few doctors and very few women doctors, comparatively speaking. Large and important community, but backward class. Unfortunately or fortunately, her father has income more than the creamy layer, therefore she did not get OBC reservation. She applied in the open category. But in her department, there were 14 vacancies. In the 14 vacancies, 2 were open, 4 are EWS, and the remaining 8 are backward class. So she had only opportunity for open category. The 2 open categories went, one to merit category and one backward class category, who got more marks than her. But the next 4 positions went to EWS. The next 4 positions went to EWS. And so she, who got less marks than her? So a backward class creamy layer young woman who wanted to be a postgraduate doctor in obstetrics and gynecology was pushed out by socially and educationally forward class who are below the EWS cutoff but got less marks than her. Look at the social impact of that. This EWS forward community people have large number of women doctors, men doctors in gynecology, in their community. They're a strong forward class, socially and educationally forward class community. So these four people from this forward class are getting into postgraduate medicine, but this backward class girl, from which community there are very few doctors to represent them, are being denied simply because her father is considered creamy layer. Right? And so the impact on the communities is another community has one less woman doctor with a postgraduate degree, and this EWS community, maybe Brahmin, maybe Vaishya, maybe Kshatriya, whatever community, with large number of doctors, they are getting one more woman doctor from that community. And therefore what happens is, and this is where the main issue comes in, the inequality between communities is going to increase. Communities is going to increase. Now, one of the main contributions of Dr. Ambedkar, from where reservations began in 1930, 1930, in the first roundtable conference, was a very, very important speech made by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar to the 1930 roundtable conference, where he said that he identified a problem. He, first of all, in that speech to the Minorities Committee in the 1930 first roundtable conference, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar said, on behalf of the depressed classes, I am here with two mandates. Congress and others had demanded only responsible government, namely government which is responsible to the people. Dr. Ambedkar said, I am here on behalf of the depressed classes to support the demand for responsible government. But he said, I am here with two mandates. The other mandate I have been given by the depressed classes which I represent is, we want a representative government, which the Congress and others did not ask for. And how did he define a representative government? And he put forward 8 safeguards to the roundtable conference, 8 safeguards for the depressed classes. And they are wonderful safeguards. In fact, the foundation of the fundamental rights and many of the provisions, progressive provisions in the Constitution, comes from this memorandum given by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar in 1930 to the roundtable conference. I'm not going through the eight safeguards or conditions that he wanted. That will take a lot of time. I'm going through 2 of them. Only to mention, second one in more detail. The fourth safeguard number 4, condition number 4, Dr. Ambedkar presented to the 1930 conference, was that depressed classes, not all communities, depressed classes must have for 10 years separate electorates, because they should choose their own representatives. Why? Because he said, condition number 4, he called adequate representation in the legislature. So the condition was, if India is to progress, if India is to be democratic, there must be adequate representation of depressed classes in the legislature. We all know that this demand for separate electorate for only 10 years was misrepresented to India and the world as a demand for communal electorates. He never used the word communal electorate. He said separate electorate where each community would choose its own representative. Each depressed class would choose its own representative. In contrast, Mahatma Gandhi Gandhiji said, I will be everyone's representative. I will be depressed classes representatives, I will be Muslims representatives, I am the only representative of India. Babasaheb Ambedkar did not say that I will represent the depressed classes. He said, I am here invited as a representative of depressed classes to propose that each depressed class must select its own representative in separate electorates for 10 years, so that leadership will grow amongst them and they will have stability. After that, he said, we must have joint electorates and reservations. This is the proposal he put forward. As you know, the British accepted this proposal. Gandhi went on a huge fast against it, and finally, to save lives and property of the depressed classes, Babasaheb Ambedkar had to tactically accept a much larger share of reserve seats, but temporarily hold back on the demand for separate electorates, which would have been very, very vital and a great contribution to our democracy if it had been accepted and implemented. Now that is condition number 4. Now we come to condition number 5, which is what is relevant to us. Condition number 5 he calls it adequate representation in public services. And Dr. Ambedkar says to the Roundtable Conference in his introduction, he says the Hindu upper caste have monopolized the public services, and they are abusing their power and their discretion to benefit themselves and to deny the depressed classes justice, equity, and good conscience. So he said how to cure this. He said the monopoly enjoyed by the Hindu upper caste in public services must be destroyed. His words, destroyed. How do we do that? He said you must establish a public service commission in every province and every part of India, in the constitution. So whole roundtable conference was to discuss what the next constitution, British Constitution of India would be, 1935 Act. It was the discussion about that. So he proposed that the 1935 Act must have a provision where there will be a public service commission which will be independent, constitutional body, and the responsibility of that public service commission will be, and these words are very important, in his words, he drafted it as a constitutional provision. He said the responsibility of the public service commission will be to ensure adequate representation, of all communities. When it came to adequate representation in the legislature, he said depressed classes. Here he said due and adequate representation of all communities in public services. Regulation of recruitment to ensure due and adequate representation in public services, where you will have more recruitment from unrepresented communities and less representation from overrepresented communities. And it must be proportionately revised to ensure this objective of adequate representation. Please note that in the original language of Baba Saheb Ambedkar, in this condition 5, the word backward is absent. The word reservation is absent. The word backward and the word reservation came actually from the southern Indian experience in Mysore, Travancore, Madras, where the ruling upper caste, in response to a non-Brahmin movement, and also Sahu Maharaj, I'm not sure whether they used the word backward class representation there, but it was used in the south. They used the language backward class for those who were not represented, and they used the word reservation. That was a known word, and therefore it was used as a compromise, as a result of a compromise in the Constituent Assembly to get this provision 16.4 inserted into the Constitution. But 16.4 is born in condition 5 of the memorandum submitted by Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar to the first Roundtable Conference. Not called reservation, but called regulation of recruitment into public services to ensure due and adequate representation of all communities. That is our real objective in reservation, to secure due and adequate representation of all communities. On 19 January 1931, Baba Saheb addressed the same first Roundtable Conference, and he told them that told the British that you will have to leave India at some point, and when you leave India, if you do not put in safeguards, these 10 safeguards that he had put, 8 safeguards that he had placed before the Minorities Committee, which was chaired by the Prime Minister himself directly. The Minorities Committee was directly chaired in the Roundtable Conference by the Prime Minister of those days, Great Britain, Ramsay MacDonald. And he told them, he told the Prime Minister and this committee that if you do not put in these safeguards, he said India will be ruled by an oligarchy. He used the word oligarchy, which I am now reminding people of the word he used. Today, India is ruled by an oligarchy of 4 communities. You all know that, 4 communities. My state is ruled by an oligarchy of 2 communities. Every state is ruled by an oligarchy of A, B, or C communities. Now, Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar's proposal that legislature must have a system of representation through separate electorates for a period of time, joint electorates, and there he uses the word reservation. But public employment and education as a feeder for public employment must have adequate regulation to ensure due and adequate representation of all communities is a way to destroy oligarchy. Now, why did Dr. Ambedkar put forward this proposal? Because, and why did he use the word all communities? Because the problem that Dr. Ambedkar saw as a root problem facing India, then and now, because of which we have backwardness, exploitation, poverty, all these issues, marginalization, is because there is an oligarchy. And what does it mean to have an oligarchy? An oligarchy means 3 or 4 communities. Oligos means few people. Monarchy means one person rules. Oligarchy means few people rule. Because 3 or 4 communities are extraordinarily powerful, and the thousands of other communities are extraordinarily weak. In any country, if you have an inequality of power between communities, the strong communities will definitely exploit the weak communities. You see the change in attitude of the Hindu dominant communities towards Muslims when the Mughals were ruling. They were writing their Vedas in Persian and reading it in Persian and learning Persian as their first mother tongue. The moment India was divided and the Muslims were reduced to a small weak minority and their dominant sections of the Muslims went into another country, they have turned on the Muslims to really prey on them. So we know that when there is a big inequality of power between communities, the strong communities will be predatory towards the small communities. Therefore, we have only 2 options. One is to make all communities weak or all communities strong. Naturally, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar preferred the second option. He is not a destructive person. He wants to make all communities strong. What is the starting point of making all communities strong? Is to give all of them an adequate, in proportion to their population, due proportion to their population, and adequate, which means some may require more than their proportion of their population. Due and adequate representation in executive, judiciary, and legislation, so that they will come to control power. In all 3 branches of the government. Using that power, they can fight the strength, or they can reduce the inequality of power between the communities in other sectors, finance, society, and so on and so forth. So therefore, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, through the demand, through reservation, which he called regulation of recruitment into public services, he is actually aiming to have achieve representation of all communities in the judiciary, executive, and of depressed classes in the legislature. That's his aim. So reservation for representation. Representation for what? Representation to reduce the inequality of power between the communities, so that we can have equality of power between communities, which will end the exploitation of the weak communities by the strong communities. Why? So that we can have democracy. Because democracy will never be allowed by an oligarchy. Why do we need democracy? So that we can have development, so that this whole country can progress. So he has given central importance to ensuring that there is due and adequate representation of all communities in the executive, judiciary, and legislature as the first step to democracy. Till we have that, we really have no democracy. We today don't really have democracy. We have votes and elections, but we will not have democracy until we have achieved this due and adequate representation of all communities in the legislature and the executive. Now, what has EWS done? Now let's go back to that unclear slide, which I will just present to you, and then we will. I'll see. If you look at this unclear side, you can see that what this EWS does is to give reservation, 10% reservation to Savarna community forward class. When they say this is meant for Savarna community poor, they are lying. Because Savarna community poor as a group, Savarna community poor groups are already, including Prime Minister's community, are all already entitled to reservation. So why did they create EWS? They created EWS to give reservation to the Savarna strongest communities, socially and educationally forward communities. Why did they do that? Because they wanted to strengthen the forward communities even more. And what will be the consequence of that? The inequality between the strength of the backward classes, SC and ST, and the Savarna strongest oligarchic communities will further increase. they can then ensure that that power will be used to prevent us from ever emerging and achieving equality with them. As a result, the significance of this is in every office, in every classroom of this country, there will be 10% of Savarna community forward class, social and educationally forward class Savarna community, who are there only because of their Savarnatva and their membership of social and educationally forward classes. They will prevent any questioning of Chaturvarnya. They will prevent any questioning of social injustice. They will make sure that there is no challenge to the oligarchy. In every classroom, in every room, in any office, 10%, big number, 10% will be from social and educationally strongest forward classes, like a Trojan horse inside the length and breadth of the state of this country, of the Indian state. This is their purpose. So their purpose is to strengthen the Savarna community, increase their strength, to increase the inequality between backward classes, SC, ST community strength, and the backward class, and the strength of the social and educationally forward classes. This is a program to benefit the Savarna forward class, not the Savarna poor classes. And that's what we must remember and bear in mind. Now, if they were interested, and I will conclude with this, if they were interested in giving through EWS assistance to the poor, then they should have given it as an economic criterion and said all people below a certain cutoff, say BPL, are entitled to reservation. If that would have happened, then they would not have been able to use EWS to simply strengthen their own community. Now, I agree with what Dr. Chauhan said, that economic reservation, which does not have any relationship with the community, is dangerous. Why? Because if an individual is picked at random simply because of economic criteria and given reservations, that individual will have no connectivity to the weak community, the backward class community or the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe community from which he comes, because he has got it only because of his individual characteristics. Whereas if you say, like they have done for EWS, you have to belong to a Savarna community, a strong Savarna community, forward Savarna community to get EWS. Why have they said that? Because that will strengthen that community, and those who benefit will know that I have come here only because my community is strong, Savarna forward class is strong. Therefore, I have to keep its strength, I have to fight for its strength. But if you bring in pure economic reservation and you give it to those members of backward class community, SC, ST, then and it is not community based, they will have no commitment to strengthening those communities. Today, we know that if X community, backward class community or SC, ST community wants to have more reservation, more opportunity, they know that if their community gains in strength, their opportunities will grow because they are getting those opportunities as members of the community. So they will naturally have a vested interest in strengthening these communities. This is why Baba Sahib Ambedkar linked reservation to the community, because he wanted to end the domination by a handful of communities of this country and to bring about equality of strength and power of all communities, which is the bedrock of democracy and a basic fundamental requirement for development and progress and democracy in this country. So economically weaker section reservation, unrelated to the community, will weaken communities and will keep the Savarna strong forward communities, and the Savarna weaker communities also they will strengthen. The Savarna community strength, using many other sources of power, will remain strong. We have seen how Mr. Fadnavis's wife has said how proud she is to be a Brahmin. We have seen how Shashi Tharoor, the very the modern Shashi Tharoor, posts a picture of his mother and two sisters saying proud Nair women, and they are the landlord class here. So we know that they have other instruments to maintain their strength and their dominant position in this country, but by removing reservation that is based on community and backward class criteria, they will ensure that our communities, backward class SC/ST communities, will not be able to gain in strength and will not be able to end the inequality of power between communities, which is our ultimate aim and source, which is good for everyone in this country, not just for us. We are fighting for representative state, reservation is only a tool, and we are fighting for representative state because it is the heart of democracy and a prerequisite for development and democracy in this country. We should not focus our fight only on reservation. We should make it very clear hereafter that our struggle is for representation, and reservation is an effective tool for that, and reservation should be used only for safeguarding reservation. It is correct that although the two dissenting judges said that Article 16 cannot be except for representation, they have opened up Article 15 for non-representation reservation, but at least 16 they have protected for only representation. We must insist that reservation, which takes away our right, I've shown you the example of how our rights are being taken away by reservation for the Savarna forward class, and we should ensure that reservation is used only for achieving representation and reducing the inequality between communities. We must demand, in conclusion, we must demand, as we are doing in Kerala, that implementation of EWS must be stopped. Let us realize that the BJP is in power only because of the support of backward classes, SC and ST, and we must say that that we will not vote for them unless they end this EWS, which is intended to only weaken us and further strengthen the forward Savarna communities. In fact, I call EWS two things exclusively and wholly for Savarna. EWS, or now I call it EWS, means enemy of weaker section. EWS is enemy of weaker section. And so, unless this enemy of weaker section is stopped, implementation must be stopped, and we must elect a parliament as soon as possible. No need to wait for the courts that will get together and in its first session amend the constitution like they did on the issue of the power of the states to designate backward classes. There was a big reaction from backward classes. They quickly reconvened parliament, amended and restored the power to the states to decide who are backward classes. Similarly, we must create enough pressure that the parliament will convene and pass an amendment to reverse this enemy of weaker sections and friend of stronger sections reservation, EWS reservation, and ensure that the dream and the goal of Babasaheb Ambedkar, that we will build a country where there are no weak communities and strong communities. All communities are strong communities for which reservation will be used through representation to build the strength of the backward classes, SC and ST, that will become a reality, and EWS will not undermine and subvert this project by strengthening the communities that are already excessively strong, by making them stronger and therefore being an enemy of weaker sections. Let me stop here. I think I've completed my 40 minutes, if not slightly more. Let me stop here, Mr. Jarunde. I had more to say, but let me stop here, and I will be happy to answer any questions.
You have explained in detail, sir, the origin of the reservation is prospect, and you rightly explained the EWS as enemy of the weaker section, sir. Thank you, sir.